Welcome to the Accelerator Labs Coffee Chats with Millie and Cal. This week we have two guests, not just one, but two. We have Beenisch Tahir, who is the innovation lead for UNDP in Pakistan. And we have Abdullah Saqib, who's the country manager for Viamo in Pakistan. And Viamo is a social enterprise that works with development organizations using mobile phones and digital technology. But what we're going to be talking about is how country offices institutionalize the exploration function. So we know that this is an important part of the work of the Accelerator Labs, that it's going to become part of the DNA, hopefully, of country offices. And we have today with us a country office that is actually doing that. So we're really happy to welcome and learn from Beenisch and Abdullah.
Hey guys, thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Super. We're thrilled to have you guys on the podcast, and we really want to dig in both in terms of what exactly is Country Office Pakistan doing to make exploration a part and parcel of your work, but also to hear from Abdullah as to what does it feel for a partner that's not really a usual suspect for us to work with UNDP. So maybe we start, Beenisch, with you. If you could tell us a little bit about how did sort of horizon scanning and exploration and a quest for non-usual suspects and ways of doing development become a thing for the country office?
At UNDP Pakistan, when we first started the innovation portfolio about 2 years ago, this was kicked off with an innovation mission done by our regional bureau. In that, we had sort of assessed our different programs and projects. In that, we had identified entry points, and then we also had a partners day where it was a bunch of startups that came to meet us and presented their work, and there was such a dynamic energy. The project managers were full of enthusiasm about these new and exciting ways of working. The startups were really excited to find a way to work with the UN as well. So from there, we realized pretty quickly that finding new ways of working is not only necessary, but it's also super interesting. And the partners that we met do exist in Pakistan. We just have to go and find them. So, the journey of, when we started horizon scanning, it's not exactly a very neat process. As, I can imagine someone in a country office is starting this journey and thinking, okay, we must do a desk review and we must understand all the approaches, etc. Yes, that's part of it, but a lot of it is also about meeting the partners, understanding the innovation ecosystem space around you. So the first step was, okay, senior management has given us a mandate to innovate. We have, basically Ignacio, who's our res rep, told us there's no other choice. We have to change the way we're working. So the way we are working is not working. So let's go find those non-traditional partners. Let's go seek out and speak to those startups that we met on the innovation day. So then the next step for me was to sort of also understand very clearly what the projects are doing and what the programs are doing, be able to understand their entry points. So whether it was a bottleneck, a complex area where an approach is not working, or just an idea that project managers have had also based on their experience. Having that understanding, then we sort of went out into the space and sort of met different partners. We went to all the panel discussions, all the innovation challenges. I judged on these innovation challenges for startups as well, where I could meet all the other startups. This was great. And the community is very dynamic. So you meet one person and they will introduce you to two more. And those two will introduce you to four more. So I was constantly being introduced to all these partners. And very quickly over time, UNDP was becoming known for the innovation work and was becoming known as, I suppose you could say, that they knew that we're exploring new partners. So we brought, so based on the project needs, we sort of matched a lot of our partners to the projects. Other times we would do learning sessions where we prepped our partners on the needs of the projects, and they would come and present their work. And then if the projects, you know, connected with them, we would, you know, host bilateral meetings. So this is kind of how the horizon scanning works for us. It's a combination of desk review and meeting the partners, also being able to anticipate the need. Other times, sometimes projects are just not aware of new approaches. So like systemic design was a presentation the innovation team hosted for the office, but we made it very relevant to our projects. And then ultimately, you know, one point I want to put out on exploration, like I never defined this as exploration. This terminology has come up because of the Accelerator Lab initiative, but it is very true. And, you know, the only way the exploration can, for instance, the exploration function can be institutionalized in the country office is that if the projects and programs and the non-traditional partners find value in this. And you have to create that demand. So it's not something that happens immediately. It took us almost 2 years to create this demand for this function. The projects have started finding value in the innovation team, managing these relationships, bringing in new ideas, bringing in new partners who can instantly do the work. And so I do believe with the Accelerator Lab, this will be accelerated because there is a mandate, there will be expertise and resources and sense making. But generally it does take time, and the value needs to be created. And this is how our sort of horizon scanning and exploration journey has sort of been evolving.
So maybe just a follow-up question on this. You paint a really interesting picture that originally you started from the inside, as in learning what UNDP does through its projects, and then going out and trying to identify non-usual partners who work in similar policy domains. But then you also, it seems that you've evolved into meeting some interesting partners and then having projects pick up on the work that they do, like the case of the systemic design. I have sort of two follow-up questions connected to this. One, have you seen more people in the office pick up this disposition to go out and look for non-usual suspects? So in a way, really distributing the exploration function away from you and onwards to more people. This is one. And two, what kind of value do you think projects are practically seeing from this work?
Now, in this year, I'm not sure how this has happened, but a lot of activities have sort of culminated. The mandate also of UNDP to do innovation, I think, has compounded this. But the projects are definitely looking out for non-traditional partners themselves now. It is really not just me. Projects have come to me and said, hey, we met this startup, you know, Viamo, for example, Abdullah's team. Half the time the work that they're doing with the projects, I no longer even know about because they're contacting them, which is great. So yeah, that has definitely spread. And I think it's also because at the senior management level, it was made very clear to the programs and projects that it is not just Beenish's job to do innovation or the innovations team to do innovation. It is everyone's role to do innovation. The idea is to mainstream this way of working in our office. So, you know, I think that message really helped. Second of all, what you asked, what value does the project see in this? You know, I think it's really, you know, it's fresh thinking. They're new solutions these partners are bringing. You know, also the non-traditional partners that we work with, they're inherently using, you know, rapid prototyping, they're experimenting, they're doing their systems mapping, you know, so they are, you know, taking the projects through this kind of co-design journey with them, and they work very fast. They're smaller, leaner organizations, very passionate, and so the projects enjoy this kind of thinking. But also the solutions provided are genuinely good solutions. they're valuable. So, for example, like I will let Abdullah talk about this. But for example, Abdullah's their digital solutions, their SMS work has actually allowed us to reach in areas that UNDP staff cannot go. We've been able to collect data from those areas via mobile phones. Through our innovation challenges, when we want to reach out to rural young people where it's very difficult to get to them, we've done it through mobile phone technology. And so we've increased our applications, from like 100 to 800 in the last challenge. So these types of values, these types of hard, like concrete solutions are valuable to the projects. And I think this is why the demand is actually growing for them.
Abdullah, I'd love to hear a little bit about how you first got connected to the UNDP Country Office.
I became the first Viamo full-time person dedicated to Pakistan, I think 2.5 years ago. The intro went from our global office to Ignacio here in Pakistan, and that the entire relationship kickstarted from that email. Right in response to that email, Beenisch was the first person we got connected to, and then it was a range of meetings that happened spanning over a year, I would say, leading to the formalization of the relationship.
Great. And this whole mention of a series of meetings, it took a year to get somewhere. This is a very common, I would say, challenge, and sometimes our partners work at different speeds than the UNDP Country Office. I'm curious, if you were in a position to kind of recommend how to think about having conversations and maybe working with outside partners differently, some of these unusual suspects like yourself differently, what kind of recommendations would you make?
So I think there's really a big paradigm shift from a sales approach to a thought partnership approach. And it is that single aspect that really makes success possible in such scenarios with organizations like UNDP. And by that, I mean that it's not really products that we should be thinking about, or I would say boxes. Instead, it's really how can we align ourselves with the right outcomes, and how can we find cost-effective ways, how can we maximize impact per dollar, and find the best and most enjoyable journey to lead us to that destination. I feel that if I look back to the past 2 years or so, even though the first few meetings were really promising, and at one point when months started, the clock started ticking, there was this devil in my mind which said, let's just not meet them anymore, because it's just taking so much time, and it's just meeting over meeting. And sometimes I felt I would say a bit of I would look at Beenisch, and I would look at the fact that she was the single person in every meeting listening to what Viamo is over, let's say, 6 months or so. Like 6 months, 8 different meetings with 8 different teams. So the one person that was saying was Beenisch. And so she could really introduce ourselves way better than us by that time. But I also found that fascinating and in fact motivating to see that one employee within an organization had the patience to actually sit through repeat meetings with different stakeholders. And I feel that it was that element to actually to align with project teams before actually signing something, to align with those teams in advance. And then when things got signed, it was easier to kick off into actual projects. So I feel, again, it's really about letting go of, I would say, budgets and costs and whatnot, and focusing on how can we align as organizations, as individuals, on key thoughts and the best practices on cost effectiveness to reach destination.
The project that you ended up and that you're currently working with the country office on, is it what kind of had come up in some of the initial conversations, or is it something that's very different? And if you could tell us a little bit about it, what are you doing with the country office?
Sure. We're in touch with almost 5 different teams within UNDP. each having different mandates. I think all of them come under, and perhaps Beenisch could clarify that better, but we work with the youth empowerment team, we work with the elections team, we work with the team focused on the tribal areas and newly merged districts, and then we regularly interact with the innovation team as well. I think one of the key things that really mattered in our relationship after the LTA was signed was timing. The LTA got signed right before the elections in 2018, and the chief election commissioner and the chief election commission was working directly with the team at UNDP to improve voter turnout. And it was at that time that we got a fresh signature on the LTA and we came in. And that was the first project that really struck a chord with everyone. And in fact, that project really meant that we were able to reach out to 40 million people across Pakistan within 4 days, right before elections, and actually get them out to vote through a range of different channels like SMS, robocalls, social media, in rural, semi-urban, and urban areas. It was that, I would say, the timelines of that project was so I would say, harsh even to ourselves, and the ability to execute it using all 4 mobile operators in Pakistan made a lot of people open their eyes wider. And it made everyone question that if we could do this in 4 days, or let's say 2 weeks of sleepless nights, I would say, then what else can we do? And it was piggybacking on that project that others started realizing, and the youth empowerment team and the team focused on FATA, the NMDs, everybody started thinking, and we quickly jumped onto that thinking bandwagon and started pro bono consulting to each team, and became friends with them and co-developing strategies and whatnot. And that is where the journey began.
What are 1 or 2 things that you're planning to do with the country office moving forward? Are there any particular project plans already being hatched to build on the work that you guys have done so far?
So definitely with the elections team, we have more of get out the vote and citizen engagement campaigns lined up. With the other team, the team focused on the newly merged districts, we're doing a lot of, I would say, provincial baseline data collection, understanding what the needs and the gaps are for better government planning purposes. Right now, the budget of that province is going to be announced tomorrow, and all of the assessment, the evaluation on the ground, the baseline was done through using mobile technology through our teams. So we have more of those baseline studies that cover large segments of population across the country being planned up. And then the third layer is really the youth empowerment work that we're doing with the UNDP team. And that is where things get really interesting, I would say, really challenging as well, where we're looking at how can we include maximum representation from the population when it comes to youth, whether it means greater women representation or greater voice of transgenders, people living with HIV, refugees, and all of the vulnerable religious minorities, all of the vulnerable communities. And all of that really culminates into the Youth Innovation Challenge that we first supported last year, and then we conducted end-to-end this year, which allows rural semi-urban youth to actually submit their innovative ideas to local problems, and then can get seed funding from UNDP and its partners. And so that really enables our partnership to go direct to the beneficiaries, empower them, and enable them to create impact that inspires each other and cross-motivates them. So I feel that these are, like, again, to sum up, improving citizen engagement, and I would say transparent planning, facilitating transparent planning for government, as well as this behavior change among youth to actually become employed or start creating jobs for others. These are all exciting projects or ambitions that are lined up and fairly formalized, I would say. But on top of everything, if I was to share one big fight that we are fighting, it's really to integrate all of the positive stuff that's happening within UNDP and in the ecosystem at large. And that really means to sit back and focus on who can be our allies in this journey. And that is where the thought partnership approach really comes in handy, where we prototype, we brainstorm with diverse stakeholders, whether it's the UN system or beyond, and sit together and co-create strategies and then implement it. So that integrated approach is really creating a ripple across the country.
I mean, just to reflect on what you've said, there was a project, and I think it's still ongoing by UNICEF, that's being run in a number of countries in Africa called U-Report, that is similarly premised on reaching citizens across the various socioeconomic strata, sitting in cities and rural areas through SMS messages and trying to get their feedback on a variety of things. But one of the sort of continued weaknesses of the approach is exactly what you just pointed out, inability to really fundamentally integrate to connect the insights and data being generated to any type of decision making and ultimately a behavior change. So in a way, I've read a couple of evaluations that have sort of characterized the project as very extractive, very good to sort of collect a bunch of data, but then neither reflect the data back to the citizens who have volunteered their insights, and in that way help them improve their own decision making, but also not necessarily using the value of all of those insights to change the system itself. And it seems that the work that you have done with the Country Office Pakistan itself is fundamentally different, not just because you seem to tweak as you go along, but also there seems to be a sort of a deliberate thinking about how do you integrate it more fundamentally. And so we will really be watching closely this space, because in many cases, what most UNDP projects being designed right now are asking for investment in is the analysis and scoping of initial conditions. So we go out to investors and donors and say, give us funding to do a project X. The first phase of that project will be understanding the initial conditions, collecting data and what have you. And it seems that the work of the country office with you is really aimed at getting that base layer as to what is going on in various parts of the country and across various questions that in itself can be a pipeline generator for the country office.
Beenisch, I'm wondering if you can tell me about some of the requests that you're getting from the country office. What are some of the things that program teams maybe are coming to you and asking for when it comes to exploration?
So now, well, when I first started, there was 0 requests. But now, the requests I'm getting are actually quite interesting. So I'll give you an example. The youth team, for instance, has just come to me saying that we need we need to understand how we can better design programming to encourage women to join the workforce. Because a big problem in Pakistan is that even the educated women don't join the workforce. And there's no, so the programming we are seeing is not exactly what seems to be working, and the team doesn't really want to go in that direction. They want to see what else is out there. So that kind of question, and we still don't have a solution. We're sort of exploring answers right now. So I get questions like that. I get questions on, I just, learned about this new approach. Is this something we can do? Or sometimes I'm just asked for partners. We have, for example, some work taking place here, and do you have any innovative partners that we could work with and sort of give the work to? We don't, no offense to the other traditional partners, but we just don't want to work with that type of methodology anymore, let's say, to be diplomatic. We want something new. So those are the kind of questions I get. And genuinely, where projects are just stuck, they just don't know where to go, they come to us.
Great. And can you tell us about 2 to 3 maybe really specific things that the country office has gotten out of working with unusual suspects? What are some concrete examples? We've heard it from Abdullah, but maybe if you could tell us about a few more.
We have developed some new service lines. So now the youth team, for instance, is able to, is it part of the youth engagement programming strategies now to also do innovation challenges. So that's one. And then another is developing social entrepreneurship programming through our SDG boot camps, which we do with another partner as well. Viamo has supported the outreach. So these are the specific service lines we get out of it. Number two is actually learning, capacity. Our colleagues at UNDP get to learn how to, use human-centered design approaches and design thinking. And so I now get to sit on conversations where our project specialists are like, well, I think in the design stage, we should include a design thinking session for this project. So we've set up a government innovation lab in Balochistan recently, and instead of just doing a usual conference launch, they wanted to do a design thinking session where they can actually get into the problems and bring the different stakeholders together quickly. So that is another specific benefit I feel that the projects have. Another one is that I think it's effective in terms of time. Non-traditional partners take less time to deliver, but give more impact. And that, I think, has been a major benefit to our projects.
So we'd like to close by asking you folks both about kind of 3 practical tips that UNDP country offices can use to best organize themselves to do horizon scanning, to come across these interesting and unusual suspects. And for you, Beenisch, we'll start with you. I have one particular request, which is kind of what is your advice around helping separate the wheat from the chaff as you're doing horizon scanning? Because there are a lot of people out there doing interesting things. Some of them are reliable, some of them may not be reliable. And so how do you do that kind of filtering, figuring out who's legitimate without closing yourself off to some potentially very interesting folks?
As you're searching for partners, there are some unreliable partners. And, unfortunately, I have had experience where we have partnered up and not had the work that we wanted delivered. But one of the ways we in that situation, one of the ways we sort of take a calculated risk is we don't invest a lot of money, right? It's small amount of money. It's never more than $10,000 to $5,000 initially to start with, right? But over time, you sort of start becoming, how do I put this, intuitive. You do a lot of reading of the founders. So when I meet a new partner, I check out the company, I check out their website, I meet with them myself before I connect them to the project. So it actually is quite a few meetings with me before I start connecting them. And so from the work, or when you speak with them, you sort of start seeing how they understand you and how they sort of present their work to you. So you can see, right, all right, this person gets it. And then before that, it's these series of meetings before you close any deals, right? We either have the learning session or bilateral meetings. Viamo had to do the same. We're doing this with another partner. And you can very quickly see from the solutions that they're delivering that, whether they're good or not, because, UNDP project managers and units are tough, right? They will ask very, very tough questions. And so if the partner is able to answer and deliver, you have a good idea. But also you do check out the work beforehand. So I'm not necessarily going to connect someone who's never done anything to the country office. I usually would have probably attended an event or seen a project, or some kind of reference is there for me in terms of that.
What would be your advice for country offices?
I think my first advice would be to speak to the programs and projects first, because the buy-in is very important in this whole process, right? You don't want to go find partners and just randomly start connecting them to the projects and programs, right? So in our case, we had an innovation group, which was a champion of champions from each project and program and senior management. It was chaired by the res rep, and we would update each other on all the innovative work and entry points. And then from there, you can sort of go ahead and start thinking about what kind of partners you need based on the approaches that you are potentially identifying. There's ways. So I kind of started very organically. I sort of knew people in the innovation network, and I just started meeting them for coffee, just hearing about their work, and they would connect me to different people. And then I made sure to attend all this, innovation events, conferences, panels, spoke about our work at UNDP wherever I could, even though, public speaking is, not my favorite thing, but it's something I've had to do, and it's the best way to position UNDP. So, positioning UNDP is very, very key in order to also attract our non-traditional suspects. The other way is also another practical tip is if you don't even know anybody, in the ecosystem. Let's say you've arrived to a new country, you don't know anybody, you're this innovation lead, you have to get started, you have all these great ideas, you've spoken to the program. Why not create a campaign? I mean, you also did it with the Accelerator Labs, do a Partners Day. So you can do a call out on social media that, hey, UNDP is looking for young, energized startups who want to work with us. If you've got an idea in governance or whatever, come meet us and have an open day, or, something like that. I think that's a great way to come. And, these partners will come to events like this. Just make sure it's the campaign is strong and very, very visible. And then from there, you speak to them, and then you can sort of bring them back into the country office, assess the work, and so on and so forth.
Wonderful. And Abdullah, from your perspective, what are practical tips that a UNDP country office could think about in terms of organizing themselves to do horizon scanning and to find interesting partners and work with interesting partners like yourself?
My first, I would say the advice applies to both sides, which is to let go of our own egos and realize that we don't know everything. And the best person who knows everything are the beneficiaries, right? And it is in that empathetic situation that we start thinking out of the box. And so, as I said, it applies on both sides, where if we don't know everything about the intervention or the outcome, it becomes a joint learning experience. And so it's really about finding partners that can learn along the way and be dynamic in their thought processes. And also willing to work together with other partners. We are often faced with situations where a lot of things a consortium is already addressing. And so we find that additional area of value that we could bring in to the consortium or to the team, and then work together with others to make it a joint experience. So I would say the first bit is really to understand that we need to be beneficiary centric and empathetic and treat each other as learning partners, and then document those learnings. I feel documentation is one big thing that's missing in the ecosystem. We have a lot of reports and learnings here and there, but what did we do that did not work the way we wanted it to? Right? What are the learnings from those I would say failures or unexpected outcomes? That documentation within the organization and for the broader ecosystem is also very important for each of us to learn. And these learnings should also be part of the events and the horizon scanning that Beenisch mentioned.
Yeah.
When we're reaching out to the broader ecosystem, whether as UNDP or as a I would say consortium, to the ecosystem saying, this is what we've learned. You can stand up and negate everything and share your experiences. And then let's sit together and add on to each other. And then the third layer is really to understand that behavior change is not only applicable to beneficiaries and populations, it's also very much needed within organizations. And quite often what we find out is that if it takes 3 months for us to do behavior change among vulnerable communities, it takes 6 or 8 months in an organization to instill that behavior change. And that behavior change could be anything. It could be, let's say, in a traditional rural support program, moving from paper-based data collection to digital data collection. That in itself is a big people-focused behavior change. There have been situations where our development sector partners have shared a scenario where they invited internal team members to take part in a capacity building exercise focused on digital data collection, and the field staff didn't show up because they thought that if they learned digital best practices, that would be the end of their jobs and things would be automated. So I feel it's also kind of understanding the people and processes that are involved and how you could change mindsets along the way. If I would really summarize this last bit, imagine a problem that we're facing and ignore the method that we are using to reach the solution. And so if we ignore technology, if we ignore financial resources, if we ignore everything, what ends up becoming the biggest problem are people themselves. How can we work together as partners within each of our organizations and then focus about beneficiaries and then focus about impact and then share those learnings so that we could accelerate that impact beyond borders. So I would say those would be like 3 thoughts that are bubbling up towards this part of the conversation.
Super. Thank you guys so much. So today we had a chance to talk to Beenisch, who is an innovation lead at UNDP Pakistan, and Abdullah, who is a country manager of Viamo in Pakistan. We learned about how Country Office Pakistan is making the practice of exploration part of the DNA of the country office work in Pakistan, and how it has really led to refreshing the offer that various projects and programs in the office are working on. And we also got to hear a little bit about how easy and at times difficult it is for partners like Viamo, which are really, as a colleague of ours, Julio, who heads the Regional Innovation Center out of Bangkok, calls them mutants, these sort of superpower creatures who UNDP doesn't necessarily work with. And when we do, it leads to massive value to our development partners. Thank you guys for your time. Thank you for your insights and your tips. This is certainly very relevant, and the things that you've told us very practical in terms of what other 59 offices are doing right now in terms of prepping the ground for the Accelerator Lab teams to come to the office. So thank you so much for investing your time with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for this conversation. And if anyone has any questions, you kind of know where to find me.